Good afternoon and welcome to the final concurrent session of the day, adding SLIs to SLOs, why student learning insights matter. Our presenter today is Dr. Shirley Kahlert, from a faculty member at Merced College. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we'll address them at the end of the talk. And on that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Let me get share screen going and my presentation up. All right, just you'd think this was my first time, but apparently I'm gonna have to ask you for your patience. The hardest part is moving all the little screens. And there we go. We should be good to go here. Okay, I'm Shirley Kahlert, and Shirley is fine. I teach at Merced College. I've been doing this for quite a long time. And today I want to talk about the productive struggle in learning and the role that it plays in especially reading instruction, which really means it relates to almost any particular discipline. And I want to talk about this idea of student learning insights, which is based on metacognition. Now, I want to emphasize that I really believe that student learning outcomes have been an important shift in our teaching paradigm and that they're really valuable. But I want to talk more about how the students' own insights into their own learning, it gives this a new dimension. So I know we don't have breakout rooms, so Brianna and Jennifer, if you could monitor the question and answer, I think that's where we're responding. If you could just type, I'm going to give everybody a moment, just type in that moment in your own education when work became challenging, and how did you feel about your abilities? Did you question your abilities to stay in school or your graduate program or wherever that came in your career? And just type in a couple of sentences into the question and answer. And Brianna and Jennifer, I will ask you if you would pick out one or two to share with us, so we can talk about how this idea of your own competency fits into your learning experience. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And Brianna and Jennifer, if you could tell me when we've got a few comments, we'll start again then. So think for just a second, when did your work become challenging and what feelings did you have at that point in your career?
We have one response at the moment. We'll wait just a couple seconds to grab a few more.
Okay, well, it takes a second to type and think, so
yeah.
Let's take this, it's worth it so we can share with each other and see.
All right, so we have a few responses. We have my first semester in grad school was the first time I was expected to be a real scholar in class on 19th century nonfiction prose.
That'll do it, nonfiction prose from the 19th century. Okay,
That'll do
that
it.
scares anybody.
Yeah. She says, I felt like I was learning to learn for the first time. I could definitely agree with that. And we have another response. When I started my doctorate program, I really doubted my ability to keep up with the younger students in my cohort, especially with the increased use of technology.
Let's do one more if you've got one more.
Looks like those are the only ones that we have at the
All
moment.
right, well,
Of course, anybody
that's
else
great.
feel free.
We'll just go with those. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we hit that moment. Mine came in graduate school with structuralist theory. I got I'm just not smart enough to understand this, but earlier in my life in ninth grade algebra, I had that sense that I wasn't ever going to be able to understand math. And many of us teach incoming freshmen, and a lot of them are making that decision about their abilities. And that decision will influence whether or not they stay in school. So I'm going to go through this assignment. This is a response to an assignment in my book. And it is a response to a challenging task, something that ups the ante a bit from high school and presents the student with material that might be more difficult than they usually can. I've got all these windows and they're over, they're on top of the slides and I'm having trouble seeing them. So that's what that pause was about. All right, so this student says in response to Michael Martinez, what is metacognition? This reading definitely felt like a college article. And he continues that it was actually challenging to read, and I was able to keep a growth mindset, and I was able to sit down and focus that this article is very important. He continues with, when I read this article, I had mixed emotions. In the beginning, I was confused. The big words were a problem. And then he came to the normal student frustration. How long is this going to take? I've got other things to do. Okay. So he acknowledges that, but then he gives us a solution on how he worked out of it. But during the whole time, I was fascinated about learning how Martinez thinks about the brain. I was able to adapt to the difficulty of the article. And then he comes up with his own reading strategy, breaking the article down in sections and make sure that I knew what I was reading and what I should learn after reading that section. So this is also an example of the student's own metacognition, his thinking about his thinking as he read that article. Whoops, I'm sorry, I just hit the wrong button. Okay. So I've put a reference to that article, and I think you're going to be able to have a link to the presentation. So if you want to find these articles afterward, they'll be in that link. Jonan Donaldson said that learning cannot be measured, it can only be described. And to me, that's a really intriguing idea, because when we're talking about student learning outcomes, we make the assumption that it can be measured. And I want to suggest that that's not a bad assumption, but there's another assumption we should make, that that the description that the students give of their own learning gives us much more information about the process, and we can verify that they've actually learned something and remembered it. A student learning insight, as I'm going to define it, is metacognition used to describe the student's own process of learning, or what might be described as authentic learning. And you're going to see here and in the handout that I am heavily influenced by Paulo Freire in this. So when they learn authentically, they are able to step outside their role of the process of doing school, which is a wonderful book by Denise Clark Pope. They move from a fixed to a growth mindset, where they can see error as part of a productive struggle that improves their understanding. Many of students, and my college is a Hispanic serving institution. Most of our students are first generation college students, bilingual, either Spanish and English, or Hmong and English, or Punjabi and English. And they think that when they go to college, that they are stupid if they don't get it on the first time. They are very reluctant to seek help, because that would show that I'm not smart enough to go to college. So the first thing that I try to do in my classes is move them to the growth mindset, and we do several pieces by Carol Dweck and others about growth mindset. Okay, now I don't know where everyone is, but I am in California, and in California we have a bill, AB 705, that that was designed to create equity in English and math classes. We found out that students didn't complete college because they couldn't get through the series of remedial classes, and if we look at denying students productive struggle, we are also denying them equity. Denying students access to challenging text deprives them of an opportunity to grow as readers and thinkers. The steady diet of remedial text pushes them into a stagnant pool and forces them to swim or flounder at the same level. So if all the reading in your class is on a particular lexile level, because that's what the average student in that class learns, the student's never going to read beyond that lexile level. But if we give them a challenging text, as you could see from the example at the beginning, then we begin to get the productive struggle that leads to authentic learning. And when we are assessing that productive struggle, we need a shift from the quality of the product to describing the insightfulness of the student's own experience of their learning. So in the factory widget system, or Freire's banking metaphor, we deposit information into the student and we take it out in tests. There is nothing wrong with summative learning like that, or summative processes like that, but the formative process of describing the student's own insights is where we really see what's going on inside the student. I'm a lot of background in reading apprenticeship, and if you don't know about reading apprenticeship or you haven't trained with them, I really suggest you check it out at WestEd, or you can just search Reading for Understanding. This is a wonderful book. There's a new edition out right now, Schoenberg, Greenleaf, and Murphy. They have many, many powerful examples of metacognitive exercises, and I'm only going to use just a few of them. But one of the things I've done in my book is to arrange the assignments around text sets. And text sets is just, anytime you've done it a million times in your career, you've paired two books that go well together. Heart of Darkness with by Conrad, by Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Two books with different perspectives on things, or two articles, a Con Pro paper would be a text set. And Schoenbeck and others talk about the difference between a vertical text set, where the level of difficulty is different, and a horizontal text set, which is, if you've done a theme-based course, it is about a horizontal text set. Text sets allow students to choose an interpretation rather than have an interpretation imposed on them. And sometimes it's a little stressful for students because they're used to getting the right answer. If I don't get the right answer, I'm dumb. The little tape goes in their head. But this allows them to understand that there is no right answer in many cases, but really an interpretation of text. So the vertical text set here would be two articles by, actually one TED Talk and one article by Dweck, Brainology and the Power of Believing That You Can Improve. The TED Talks are great for students who are just learning to code switch to academic English, because they can hear the academic English as well as read it. And the TED Talks are often very, very powerful. The horizontal text sets, and my whole book is built on text sets, so that students can make connections between articles that are unique and original to their own thinking, would be Dweck's article Brainology, which is listed for a lay audience, Csikszentmihalyi's The Secret to Happiness, which is a TED Talk, but a much more complicated and academic TED Talk. And then we move to the Martinez article, What is Metacognition? And the productive struggle happens when the students can connect different parts of the text set. So in the example at the beginning, the student was able to connect his growth mindset reading in Dweck with Martinez, What is Metacognition? And see that he could develop a growth mindset, and that sense that information is important, and rather than the right answer. So he develops that and has that student learning insight. Okay, so here's the assignment. Here's how it works in detail. Read Michael Martinez, What is Metacognition? Complete a preview chart on the vocabulary. Complete a metacognitive research log. Reflect on challenges and moments of difficulty. And that's what you read at the beginning of this talk. Okay, this is a metacognitive reading log. It's a double column journal. It is scored by the student when they turn it in. And this is I think you can just put in metacognitive reading log in your Google, and you'll get the, and then put image, and you'll get the image of it from the textbook. But on the left side, I use the concept from They Say, I Say, which some of you may use as a text for a class as well. The left side is the they say. The left side is what are the points that the author makes? What are your key quotations, or what Reading Apprenticeship calls your golden lines? On the right side is the place for your questions, concerns, argue with the author. It's pretty much unlimited. And students, I get student feedback from this, saying that this has changed their life. That is, they can focus when they're reading. They understand better when they go back to write a paper based on their reading. They can find things, which is sometimes difficult as they learn to be organized as a researcher. And then they do that on the article. They score the article. And the Reading Apprenticeship book, it's the scores for STEM, but I really like it. It starts with Nobel laureate as the best, and goes down to lab technician. And then I read and score and explain the difference between my score and their score. So they learn to take responsibility for the quality of their work and the quality of their thinking. This is the preview for it, and our student points out doing the preview was really helpful because I was able to get the definitions and really understand what the author was talking about. Now, I want to point out with how academic this is. We've got Wittgenstein in there, and Vygotsky, and Socrates, meta memory, meta comprehension, really big words. So this is where the text set pays off, because here's where the productive struggle starts. That is, we have to figure out what's going on here. I don't know these things. This is the context for this article. And they can recognize that how understanding that context really leads them to a solid interpretation of their reading assignment. It also breaks the structure down, which is if you're doing this because you're assigned it, you can also do this on your own. You can skim through the article, look up the big words or the people that you don't know, the authors that you don't know, and Google them, and get a little bit, dig a little bit deeper into the meaning of the article. Okay, and then finally, the assignment that you saw at the beginning of the paper, the answer to the assignment, the reflection. Did this reading seem more difficult to you? Were you able to keep a growth mindset? What emotions did you experience? And that's what I asked you to do as a group at the beginning of it. And what strategies did you use to adapt to the increased difficulty? So as a set, as I read these assignments, I can measure, I can see that my students met the student learning outcomes because they understood this very difficult article. But I also can see qualitative information, much like I would get from a focus group, about how they are actually learning. And I can see what they need to learn, but or maybe a misconception that they have about the article, and correct it. But for the most part, they are in the driver's seat. They are creating meaning, they are making meaning, and they are in charge of their own interpretation, which is exactly what they'll need to do when they move to upper division and graduate classes. I have a good idea of context for the development of a freshman English course because I've taught at UC Merced at the University of Hawaii, and I've taught upper division and graduate courses as well. So they do amazing things. They get amazing insights, and it's a pleasure to watch their work. So what really excites me as a teacher is when I get these kind of responses back. And I'm writing an article with some reading apprenticeship colleagues as part of a book that will come out next year, I think, on reading apprenticeship practitioners and what we got. And my book, The Persistent Writer, is like a giant focus group because I can see what they're learning. I can literally read how they are learning and what they understand, what they don't understand. And I love these quotes, and I want to take enough time to go through them fairly slowly. All of these students are, I don't know what we call them. We call them diverse, we call them marginalized, we call them at risk. They are students who are struggling with college writing, profoundly struggling in some cases. So they said things like, I was kind of able to take it into my own protective and turn it in a way I could understand. Now, the language there shows us the liminal state that they're in. They are in their first year of college. They're not sure yet that they're a college student, but they're trying to describe their learning, and that tells us a lot. I asked questions pertaining to the article and used the article's information to critical think. It was what I could relate to the meaning. I felt an open mind to learn all the things that I didn't know beforehand. One of my favorites, it was a learning read, and basically trusting myself mainly and standing on what I was interpreting into my own words. And I think you see in these quotes, you see that liminal position, the fact that they're just making changes in their code switching. They're not exactly sure about how to talk about academic work, but they're getting it, and they are driving it. They are finding their own meaning, and more importantly, they're finding a methodology for themselves to continue to make meaning in their academic work. So again, I'm in love with the language. I'm in love with the tentative quality of the learning, because it is crossing a threshold. A door is open, and they're starting to go through that door. Okay, so student learning insights help students achieve student learning outcomes because they respond to feedback as information, not criticism. They are more engaged in their education. They have ownership. They are more likely to persist. They are more likely to move toward their goal, and they feel in control over their own learning. And that is my homage to Paulo Freire at the bottom, because they are engaged in authentic learning. They are outside the banking metaphor, and they are starting to think for themselves. And there's my thank you. With gratitude for every student that has put up with all of my trial and error methods to get where I am. I have a wonderful active learning community of practice friends all over the state and country, and Jonan, who has been so helpful in giving me learning theory resources to back up my observations. And that is my visual equivalent of a works cited page in case you want to follow up with things. So I would like to just open it up for discussion, because I'm actually more interested in what you have to say than what I have to say, and go from there. So I think our methodology is to type into the question and answer box. Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So we do have one comment, and it's students can't grow through our lessons without challenging teacher expectations. High expectations allow me to teach my students how to stretch their understanding.
Okay, can Kay talk? Can we hear Kay if she talks? Or whoever Kay is? He
They can type more into the question box.
in the section.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Mhm.
so what are some of the things you do to do that? What kind of what do you teach and what kind of expectations do you have? Now nobody's going to participate. They're going to say because oh my God, I'm going to have to type if I talk. Please type. Okay.
Just like our students.
We're the texting generation. Okay, we need more words. Tell my students, be more generous with your words. Or anyone, what are some of the things you do to create these high expectations for your students? No? Okay. I have I can go through I have another presentation that you might find interesting. Oh, there's Jennifer. Okay.
I was just typing in. Thank you for your response.
All right, there's that awkward moment in class again. Okay. If anybody's interested, I can talk about how shifts in discourse community or code switching plays into this. Would you like me to do that? Brianna, Jennifer?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, so give me a minute to switch.
We have about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, I can do
Okay.
part of that presentation. I think
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Because that's another way that we lose students, is that we don't recognize the importance of language, that language is our culture, our sense of identity, and then we're saying, okay, you're going to write like your paper like this, and as Bordeaux and Passeron say, academic language is no one's mother tongue, right? That is that we weren't born speaking academic English, and they give up because this doesn't sound like me. I don't feel like I'm expressing myself. This is somebody else. So I do a lot of work with Goffman's presentation of self, and they're actually reading the article they read before what is metacognition, is about, I'm sorry, I can't walk and chew gum. It's one of my character flaws. Okay, here we should go. So that change is very different. That academic language is no one's mother tongue. It's something that you learn. You're not stupid because you can't figure out MLA. All of those things make a difference in retention and success for students. All right. So the quote comes from Bordeaux and Passeron, and they're wonderful if you read them. Students have a fundamental right to demand that we explain concepts to them in a language they can understand. And I would argue that if we do otherwise, that we are guilty of inequities and discriminations, that language is born in social class and community. And education is the process of transitioning from the language of the community to the language of the profession. And you could see why the assignment that I put in the first slideshow is exactly that. It is a scaffolded, supported transition from the language of the community to the language of the profession. And we actually, in my class, study speech communities in the first module. And then this is, if you need that reference, Bordeaux and Passeron, academic discourse, a French sociologist who did a study, and it's in strange translated French, but students get the feeling that their education belongs to another world, that it's not a part of the world they live in, and therefore they become alienated and separated from everything that we do in the classroom. So a lot of us know, and this hooks up to the first one, about imposter syndrome. And when in my book, they have a reflection on that, I would say 9 out of 10 freshmen in English basic skills, not basic skills English, but in English 1A, transfer level 1A, say that they feel that they have imposter syndrome. And they are really, and again, you could tell from the tentative language that we looked at in the student learning insights, that they are moving from a personal self to a professional self. And that, as you experienced in the opening exercise, is often fraught with self-doubt and discipline and difficulty, and a sense that maybe this isn't my real world, that I don't belong here. And then we lose them at that point. I'm going to leave that, but that's another great book by Joseph Williams, which distinguishes the real rules and the social rules of English. So here's a couple of shifts in if you're an English teacher, that the shift to avoiding you, that's another thing that students comment on over and over and over again, that they will write a sentence like, you will avoid procrastination if you find intrinsic motivation. And we want them to focus on the subject students. We want them to put the keyword in the subject position to create cohesion in their essay. So making that shift, they want to preach and teach about it, and they will use you. Okay. And then we talk about I. Does the assignment ask you to use personal experience? Do you want to use that? But to think about how they are choosing the grammatical person of their essay. And that's one of the key shifts from the language of their communities to the language of the academy, is to make that shift to the third person and write about the subject, not yourself or your audience. So it doesn't feel like me, they think, because they don't know all the social rules of English. There's new vocabulary, there's new sentence patterns, there's new documentation issues. We lose a lot of students on just using MLA citations or signal phrases that mystifies them. And again, in my book, my students are constantly giving me feedback about these. So I have thousands and thousands of qualitative data, pieces of qualitative data to support these emotions that they have. We have the guided pathways movement. I'm sure many of you do in California. And one important guided pathway is that it is a linguistic journey to a profession. The higher you go in any given study, discipline, major area, the more your vocabulary will change, the more of a professional vocabulary that you have, the closer you are to reaching that professional goal. And Rob Johnstone says student experience has to change to get the metric to change. We can't get the data of student success unless we change the way that we're measuring student success. And I would argue, and this is the point of the first presentation, that we have to look at more the student's perception of their own learning rather than some external quantitative measurement of the learning. I'm not arguing in any sense, because Rob is a statistician, and I don't mean to say that there's anything wrong with the quantitative data, but we have to look at both if we're going to understand what's going on. Okay, and they can get there, as you could see in the first presentation, with metacognitive skills, with grit and growth mindset, and these things help optimize their classroom experience. And we look an awful lot at the curricular path, at the intellectual path, but we don't look at their emotional guided pathway. those personal changes that they have to make. So this is reflecting. I was delighted with her talk this morning, our keynote speaker, because this is a reiteration of what she was saying. Create a safe classroom space. Don't assume what students know. Plan assignments so that error isn't fatal but productive, and value the formative rather than the summative. Our whole system is built on the summative. It's built on objective measurement of learning, and the formative tends to atrophy in that environment. No one can learn if they are threatened with failure or undervalued because of the way they speak. And speech communities, theories of speech communities, discourse communities, code switching help them value the way they speak and write, while encouraging them to learn the academic discourse differences. Okay, we start with a couple of articles on why bilingualism is an asset, not a deficit, and that speech communities are different, but no one speech community, including academic discourse, should be privileged over the other. It's just a different speech community. Don't assume what they know, don't judge, and help them understand. And that's, again, pretty much what our keynote speaker said this morning. So encourage the growth mindset. This one's really interesting. People don't learn at the same rate. And ever since we were in grad school, the first time we created a syllabus, we set everything out in measured weeks. Okay, week 1, you're going to do this. Week 2, you're going to do this. Week 3, you're going to do this. But some people are still on week 1 when other people are on week 8. And they don't learn at the same rate. So I use target dates instead of due dates. Okay. And I think finally we assume that everyone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but we also need to make sure that students have other resources that counteract the effects of poverty. They may need mental health therapy, they may need food, they may need clothes. And if you're thinking about being homeless, it's really, really hard to learn. So our campus has support programs that we can refer students to that can help counteract the effects of poverty. Okay. There's a couple of suggestions for formative metacognitive reading logs. You saw that one, reflections, pair shares, project-based learning, all take us beyond the banking metaphor. And that's just a book that learning occurs continuously over a long period of time on parallel, in parallel on multiple thoughts. It's messy. If you think that, okay, this is a test for the first third of the semester, oh my God, 2/3 of the class scored too low. They had, D's and F's on the test. They're still learning. And I often give, in classes where I give exams, I give a reflection on the exam and a reflection on their learning, so that I can see the inside as well as the outside. Jonan talks about the constructivist model, which is projects, collaboration, perspective talking, self-evaluation, reflection, learner agency, interest-based learning, real-world impact, critical work. It's not to say the things on the left are unproductive, but when we give them agency, we get empathy, authenticity, democratic engagement, social justice, and global citizenship. And boy, it's humbling to go through your presentation as a English professor and find your typos as you're talking. So I apologize for those. Okay, so design and describe in our curriculum means equity. Learning should be transparent. It should be carefully designed. It can be described. It's dynamic, not static. It's continuous. It is bloody messy, and it takes time, and not everyone's on the same schedule. So that's my second talk. Will you type in the box now? Please. Okay. Okay.
So we do have a participant that has offered a comment for us, and maybe some support could be given from you. With regard to writing, this instructor is trying to find students. She's finding students using AI more. Now they're looking at how to use AI to benefit students in writing and in thinking about concepts.
Okay, should I click that button, answer live?
You can talk about it in your
Yeah,
presentation.
okay.
Mhm. Thank you.
So I am the only person in my family that's not a computer programmer. And so I've had a lot of tech surrounding my teaching, even though my PhD is in medieval literature. And I am all for any asset. Any computer program can be used for good or evil. I'd like to explore this more. I'm really interested in the technical aspects of creating sentences. It's something that I've been fascinated in for almost 50 years now. So I could see where you could use AI to teach students to generate sentence patterns. For example, one of the things we try for a lot is to use strong verbs and the character, actor, agent in the subject position. So that sentences answer the question, who does what to whom or what. And I think AI could be used at that point to say, oh, look, you generated the sentence. That's great. But in this sentence, nobody knows who the actor is in that sentence. So anything that gets nerdy and technical really fascinates me, and I would really love to see where the future takes us in that direction. That's a fabulous question. I love it.
Thanks so much for your response.
Jennifer, I think it cut the last part of what you were saying off. If we don't have any other questions, which I don't see any right this moment, we can, oh, there's my face. I thought I was on already. Sorry, Jen.
There's one more question.
Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
The same instructor is looking at comparing a student's original work with what AI generates and how it's different.
I think it's a fabulous idea, because I often just do that by hand with my students. I'll just take a sentence and rewrite it. I'm the AI in that case, okay, and rewrite it and then ask them to compare it so that they can get into those more effective sentence patterns of who does what to whom or what. I usually try to have at least one 15-20 minute one-on-one with all of I teach mostly online anymore. It's ever since COVID. And in a Zoom session where their work is on the screen, we can rewrite really quickly together and they can see it. I could see, matter of fact, maybe I will ask my computer programmer son if he could do this, if he could generate a program where you type in a sentence, the student types in a sentence, and then it identifies what we think is the structural grammar of the sentence. So I know that that's a really hard AI problem the last I knew, maybe it's been fixed since this new whole wave of AI composition has come out, but it's hard for computers to identify subjects and verbs, and that would be a difficulty. But I will ask the boy genius what he knows and if that can be done. But I go for it, explore this. This is a wonderful direction for our profession to take. And I'm glad you're not panicking like, oh, they'll get the computer to write their paper and they won't do it. No, you all have ways you can keep them from doing that. You're smarter than that. So
Great, thank you for that. Looks like we are actually just about out of time for the day. So thank you so much, Dr. Shirley, for all your valuable information you share with us, especially doing a double presentation, throwing all the information in there for us.
thank you so much for having me. Can you put my email in there somewhere?
In the chat?
In the that everybody can see?
Yeah.
Feel free to contact me. I sent the link. Did you have the link were we able to share that link?
I can share that link, yes.
I'll put it in there. That's a link to get a desk copy of my book, if you're interested, and it's got 4 free grammar, just-in-time grammar presentations that you can use to plug into comments on Canvas. So try them out, give me feedback. I'd love to hear back from you. But thank you all for attending, and thank you for attending at the end of your day. It's the middle of my day here on the West Coast, but it's the end of your day.
Yeah, the end of our day over here and wrapping up day 1 of IES on a high note. So thank you.
Do you get a good dinner tonight?
Oh.